Have you ever passed by someone in need and thought, someone else will help? Maybe you were in a hurry, maybe you didn't want to get involved. But what if you were their only hope? Today, we're diving into a story that flips the script on who we think the good guy is. It's a story where the least likely person steps up, and the ones you'd expect to help just walk by. Stick around, because by the end of this, you might see your everyday choices and who you consider your neighbor in a whole new light. All right, picture this. A lawyer, an expert in religious law, comes up to Jesus with a question that's been on his mind. He's not just curious, he's testing Jesus, trying to see if he can trip him up. So he asks, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Now, that's a big question, right? It's the kind of question that cuts to the core of what everyone wants to know. What do I need to do to secure my place in eternity? What's the ultimate requirement? Jesus, as he often does, turns the question back on the lawyer. What is written in the law? How do you read it? And the lawyer, being the expert that he is, nails the answer. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Sounds like a solid answer, right? Jesus agrees. You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live. But the lawyer isn't satisfied just yet. He's looking for a loophole, a way to define exactly who he's required to love. So, he asks the follow-up question that sets the whole story into motion. And who is my neighbor? And that's when things get really interesting. So, to answer the lawyer's question, Jesus begins to tell a story. He says, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Now, this wasn't just any road. This road from Jerusalem to Jericho was notorious. It was steep, winding, and dangerous, full of rocky cliffs and hiding spots where bandits often waited to ambush travelers. People knew to be cautious on this road. And sure enough, this traveler, an ordinary man minding his own business, gets attacked. The bandits jump him, strip him of everything, beat him, and leave him there on the side of the road, barely alive. Imagine it. This man is lying there, helpless, covered in dust and blood, unable to move. No money, no clothes, no way to call for help. He's been completely abandoned, left to die by these robbers. This is where the story takes a turn. The man's only hope is that someone will come along and help him. And this road was traveled often enough. Surely someone will stop, right? But what happens next? Well, help is about to come, but not in the way anyone expects. So there he is, lying on the side of the road, half dead, when a priest comes walking down the same path. Now, if you're hearing this story, you're probably thinking, all right, here's the guy who's going to help. A priest, someone dedicated to God, someone who knows the law about loving your neighbor. This is the hero, right? But what does the priest do? He sees the man lying there, but instead of stopping, he crosses to the other side of the road and keeps walking. He doesn't even check to see if the man is alive. He just keeps going. Now, this is shocking, right? The one person who should be leading by example, who should be showing compassion, chooses to ignore the man's suffering. Maybe he's worried about becoming unclean by touching someone who might be dead. Maybe he's in a hurry. We don't know for sure. But what we do know is that he saw the need and did nothing. It's a moment that makes you think. How often do we see someone in need and, for whatever reason, look the other way? But before we can dwell too much on that, another person comes along. Surely, this time, things will be different. Just when you think things might turn around, another person appears on the scene. A Levite. Now, a Levite is also someone who works in the temple, assisting the priests with religious duties. He's someone who knows the law, who understands what it means to love God and love others. So, as he approaches the man lying there, beaten and helpless, you can almost feel a glimmer of hope. Surely this guy will stop, right? He's got to be different from the priest. But no, the Levite does the exact same thing. He sees the man, recognizes the situation, and then crosses to the other side of the road, just like the priest before him. He passes by, leaving the man in his suffering, not lifting a finger to help. At this point, if you're hearing this story for the first time, you might be frustrated. Two people, both supposedly religious, both in positions of leadership, have failed to show even the most basic compassion. And now you're left wondering, who's going to help this man? Is there anyone left who will actually stop and do something? And then, out of nowhere, a Samaritan comes along the road. Now, for the people listening to Jesus tell this story, this is a twist. Samaritans were despised by the Jews. There was serious tension between them. These two groups didn't associate with each other, and they certainly didn't help each other. But here's where things take a surprising turn. The Samaritan sees the man lying on the ground, beaten and abandoned, and instead of passing by like the others, he feels compassion. He doesn't stop to think about their differences. He doesn't hesitate or wonder if it's worth the risk. He simply chooses to help. You can picture him getting off his animal, kneeling down beside the injured man, and carefully tending to his wounds. He pours wine on the wounds to disinfect them, and then oil to soothe them. He's doing everything he can to provide care, right there on the side of the road. And here's the thing. This is the person everyone least expected to show kindness. The Samaritan, the supposed enemy, is the one who stops, who shows mercy. He goes beyond just noticing the man's suffering. He takes action. But he's not done yet. There's even more to come. The Samaritan doesn't just stop with basic first aid. No, he goes even further. After tending to the man's wounds right there on the side of the road, he lifts him up and places him on his own animal, likely a donkey. This means the Samaritan is now walking, while the injured man gets to ride. He's putting the man's needs ahead of his own comfort. Then he leads the man to an inn. Imagine the journey, slow, difficult, with the Samaritan making sure the man doesn't fall off or get hurt further. When they finally arrive at the inn, the Samaritan could have just left him there and moved on. But he doesn't. Instead, he stays with him, continuing to take care of him through the night. He's not just doing the bare minimum. He's going the extra mile, ensuring that this stranger, this man he had no reason to help, has everything he needs to recover. It's compassion in action, in its truest form. But the Samaritan isn't finished yet. The next day, he's about to make an even bigger commitment to the man's well-being. The next morning, the Samaritan is still by the injured man's side. But now, he's got to continue his journey. So what does he do? He goes to the innkeeper, takes out 2 denarii, a significant amount of money, enough to cover several days of care, and hands it over. Then, he says something remarkable. Take care of him, and when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Think about that. He doesn't just drop the man off and leave him there. He's making sure that the man is cared for, even after he's gone. And not only that, he promises to come back, to settle any additional costs. The Samaritan is committing to the man's full recovery, no matter what it takes. This is more than a quick act of kindness. It's a long-term commitment. The Samaritan is willing to go the distance, ensuring the stranger, a man who, by society's standards, was his enemy, has everything he needs to get back on his feet. The unexpected generosity and compassion of the Samaritan have completely shifted the story. But there's one more question to be answered. With the story told, Jesus turns back to the expert in the law and asks him the question that brings everything into focus. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The lawyer, probably feeling the weight of the story, can't avoid the truth. He responds, the one who showed him mercy. He can't even bring himself to say the word Samaritan, but he knows the answer is clear. In that moment, everything clicks. The neighbor isn't defined by background, status, or who we think deserves help. The neighbor is anyone who shows compassion and mercy. Anyone who steps in when someone is in need, no matter who they are. Jesus looks at the lawyer and delivers the final, powerful instruction. Go and do likewise. This is the heart of the story. It's not just a lesson for that moment. It's a call to action for everyone. It's a reminder that being a good neighbor isn't about who we are or what we believe, but about how we treat others, especially when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. And now, the challenge is laid out for all of us. As Jesus says, go and do likewise, it's clear that this isn't just a story. It's a challenge. The people listening, including the lawyer, must now grapple with what it truly means to love their neighbor. It's not just about loving those who are easy to love or those who are like us. It's about showing mercy, even when it's hard, even when it's unexpected. And that's the real heart of the story. The Samaritan, the one who was supposed to be the enemy, was the one who acted as the true neighbor. He didn't just pass by like the priest and the Levite. He didn't make excuses. He saw someone in need, and he did whatever it took to help, even though it cost him his time, his resources, and his comfort. But this story isn't just about the Samaritan. It's about all of us. We're being asked the same question Jesus posed to the lawyer. Who is your neighbor? It's a call to open our eyes to the people around us, to those who are hurting, broken, or in need. And it's a reminder that sometimes the people we least expect to help, or those we might avoid, are the ones we're called to show mercy to. The stakes are clear. Loving our neighbor means loving without limits, without boundaries, and without hesitation. And now, the question hangs in the air for everyone listening. Will we be like the Samaritan, or will we be the ones who cross to the other side of the road? As the story comes to a close, the weight of Jesus' words lingers. Go and do likewise. This isn't just a lesson about mercy. It's a direct challenge to everyone listening, including us. The Samaritan's actions didn't just change the life of the man he saved. They flipped the script on what it means to be a neighbor. The lawyer had asked, "Who is my neighbor?" expecting a clear boundary, a definition that made it easy to know who deserved love and who didn't. But Jesus' answer is that there are no boundaries when it comes to compassion. In the end, the Samaritan wasn't just a neighbor to the man in need. He was an example to us all. Jesus is calling us to be that person who steps in when no one else will, to go beyond what's expected, to love in a way that crosses cultural, social, or even personal barriers. The real question now is, what will you do? Will you walk past the person in need like the priest and the Levite, staying within your comfort zone? Or will you be like the Samaritan, willing to stop, willing to get involved, willing to show mercy to someone who might be different from you? Jesus doesn't just want us to understand this story. He wants us to live it. The payoff is clear. When we show mercy, we're not just helping others. We're living out the love we've been called to give. The challenge is before us. So what kind of neighbor will you be?